Bullied victim becomes a millionaire. At the class reunion, her response to her tormentors will make you weep. In the small town of Oak Ridge, Texas, 12-year-old Olivia Parker rushed through the school gates, her heart pounding. She was late again. As she hurried down the hallway, the worn soles of her second-hand shoes echoed loudly. Olivia kept her head down, hoping to avoid drawing attention to herself. Well, look who finally decided to show up," a mocking voice called out. Olivia's stomach dropped. It was Amber Thompson, the most popular girl in school. Amber and her friends surrounded Olivia, their perfectly styled hair and brand new clothes, a stark contrast to Olivia's disheveled appearance. "What's wrong, Olivia? Couldn't find anything nice to wear in the dumpster this morning?" Amber sneered. Olivia felt her cheeks burn with shame. She wanted to disappear, but she couldn't. She had promised her mom she would stay in school, no matter what. The day dragged on, each class a battle for Olivia to stay focused. Her mind kept wandering to her mother, lying sick at home. The thought of her mom alone, unable to even get out of bed, made Olivia's chest tighten with worry. As the final bell rang, Olivia breathed a sigh of relief. She had made it through another day, but her relief was short-lived. "Hey, Olivia," Amber called out, her voice sickly sweet. "We're having a little get-together in the gym. Why don't you join us?" Olivia hesitated. Every instinct told her to run, but a small part of her dared to hope. Maybe they were finally accepting her? With trembling steps, Olivia followed Amber and her friends to the gym. As they entered the locker room, Olivia's unease grew. Something didn't feel right. Suddenly, hands grabbed her from behind. Olivia tried to scream, but a hand clamped over her mouth. She was shoved roughly into a locker, the door slamming shut before she could react. "Have a nice night, trash girl." Amber's laughter echoed as footsteps faded away. Panic set in as Olivia realized what had happened. She banged on the locker door, screaming for help. But the gym was empty. Everyone had gone home. Hours passed. Darkness fell. Olivia's throat was raw from shouting. Her fists were bruised from pounding on the metal door. Tears streamed down her face as she thought of her mother, probably worried sick, unable to even call for help. The locker was tiny, barely big enough for Olivia to sit. The air grew stuffy, and a horrible smell from old gym clothes made her gag. She tried to stay calm, to think of a way out, but fear clouded her mind. As the night wore on, exhaustion took over. Olivia drifted in and out of consciousness, her dreams filled with terrifying images of being trapped forever. Morning light finally seeped through the vents of the locker. Olivia's whole body ached. She had long since lost her voice from screaming. Just as despair threatened to overwhelm her, she heard footsteps. "Hello? Is anyone here?" A gruff voice called out. With the last of her strength, Olivia banged weakly on the locker door. The footsteps grew closer. Suddenly, the locker door swung open. Olivia blinked in the bright light, her eyes focusing on the concerned face of Mr. Harrison, the strictest teacher in school. "Good Lord," Mr. Harrison gasped, taking in Olivia's disheveled state. "What happened to you?" Olivia couldn't speak. She simply fell forward, her legs giving out after hours of confinement. Mr. Harrison caught her, his usual stern expression replaced with genuine concern. Olivia sat on her worn couch, staring blankly at the wall. It had been a week since the locker incident, and she hadn't left the house. Her mother, too weak to get out of bed, called out from the bedroom. "Olivia, shouldn't you be at school?" Olivia's stomach twisted with guilt. She couldn't tell her mom the truth. "It's okay, Mom. It's a holiday," she lied, her voice barely above a whisper. A knock at the door made Olivia jump. She froze, afraid it might be Amber or her friends coming to torment her further. The knocking persisted. Slowly, Olivia approached the door and peeked through the peephole. To her surprise, she saw Mr. Harrison standing there, his face set in its usual stern expression. Olivia hesitated, then opened the door slightly. "Mr. Harrison, what are you doing here?" "May I come in, Olivia?" he asked, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it at school. Reluctantly, Olivia let him in. Mr. Harrison's eyes widened as he took in the sparse, run-down apartment. His gaze lingered on the stack of past-due bills on the coffee table. "Olivia, you haven't been to school in a week," Mr. Harrison said, getting straight to the point. "I'm here to understand why." Olivia looked away, unable to meet his eyes. "I can't go back there," she mumbled. Mr. Harrison sighed, then did something unexpected. He sat down on the couch and patted the seat next to him, inviting Olivia to join him. "I know what happened that night," he said quietly, "and I want you to know that those responsible have been punished." Olivia's head snapped up. "Really?" Mr. Harrison nodded. "But that's not why I'm here. I'm here because I see potential in you, Olivia. Potential that shouldn't be wasted." For the first time, Olivia really looked at Mr. Harrison. His eyes, usually so cold, now held a warmth she'd never noticed before. "I had a daughter once," Mr. Harrison said, his voice catching slightly. "She would have been about your age now." "What happened to her?" Olivia asked, curiosity overcoming her usual shyness. "We lost her to cancer 5 years ago," he replied, his eyes misting over. "Since then, I've thrown myself into teaching, trying to make a difference in students' lives. The way I couldn't for her." Olivia felt a lump form in her throat. She'd always seen Mr. Harrison as just another adult who didn't understand, but now she saw him differently. "I'm offering you a chance, Olivia," Mr. Harrison continued. "Private tutoring sessions after school, and a job as my assistant in the library. It won't be easy, but it could change your life." Olivia's mind raced. Part of her wanted to accept immediately, but years of disappointment made her hesitate. "Why me?" she asked. "Because I see in you the same fire I saw in my daughter," Mr. Harrison replied, "a determination to succeed, no matter the odds." As Olivia considered his offer, her mother called out again. Mr. Harrison raised an eyebrow. "Is your mother ill?" he asked. Olivia nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "She has a chronic illness. That's why I'm often late or miss school. I have to take care of her." Understanding dawned on Mr. Harrison's face. "All the more reason for you to accept my offer. An education is your ticket to a better life for both you and your mother." Olivia took a deep breath. "Okay," she said finally. "I'll do it." Mr. Harrison smiled, a rare sight that transformed his usually stern face. "Excellent. We'll start tomorrow after school." As Mr. Harrison stood to leave, he paused at the door. "Oh, and Olivia, there's something else you should know. I have a connection to your family, one I've only recently discovered, but that's a conversation for another time." Before Olivia could ask what he meant, Mr. Harrison was gone, leaving her with more questions than answers. The next day, Olivia returned to school. As she walked down the hallway, she saw Amber and her friends huddled together, shooting angry glares her way. "This isn't over," Amber hissed as Olivia passed. Olivia's steps faltered, but then she remembered Mr. Harrison's words. She straightened her back and kept walking, ignoring Amber's threats. For the first time in a long time, Olivia felt a glimmer of hope. She didn't know what the future held, or what Mr. Harrison's mysterious connection to her family was, but she was determined to find out. And more importantly, she was determined to succeed, no matter what obstacles stood in her way. Months passed, and Olivia's life began to change. Under Mr. Harrison's guidance, her grades improved dramatically. She spent her afternoons in the library, studying and helping Mr. Harrison organize books. For the first time, Olivia felt like she had a purpose beyond just surviving day to day. One afternoon, Mr. Harrison approached Olivia with a flyer. "There's a state science competition coming up," he said. "I think you should enter." Olivia's eyes widened. "Me? But I've never done anything like that before." "Exactly," Mr. Harrison replied. "It's time you showed everyone, including yourself, what you're capable of." Despite her doubts, Olivia agreed. She spent weeks working on her project, often staying late at school to use the lab equipment. Her mother noticed the change in her daughter. "You seem different, Olivia," she said one evening. "Happier." Olivia smiled. "I am, Mom. I think things are finally looking up for us." The day of the competition arrived. Olivia stood nervously in front of her display, explaining her project to the judges. To her surprise, she found herself enjoying it. When the results were announced, Olivia could hardly believe her ears. She had won first place. News of Olivia's victory spread quickly through Oak Ridge High. Suddenly, teachers who had barely noticed her before were praising her intelligence. Even some of her classmates started treating her differently. But not everyone was happy about Olivia's success. Amber watched from the sidelines, her eyes narrowing with each compliment Olivia received. "It's not fair," Amber complained to her friends. She was nothing before. How did this happen? As Olivia's academic success grew, so did the rumors. Whispers began to circulate about the amount of time she spent with Mr. Harrison. "Have you noticed how she's always in his classroom after school?" one student murmured. "I heard he drives her home sometimes," another added. Olivia tried to ignore the gossip, focusing instead on her studies. But the rumors persisted, growing more outrageous with each passing day. One afternoon, Olivia overheard two teachers talking in the hallway. "It's inappropriate," one said. "A teacher shouldn't have such a close relationship with a student." "I agree," the other replied. "Someone should report it to the principal." Olivia felt sick. She knew the truth, that Mr. Harrison was simply being kind, trying to help her succeed. But how could she explain that without making things worse? As her senior year approached, Olivia threw herself into college applications. With Mr. Harrison's encouragement, she applied to several prestigious universities, including her dream school. The day the acceptance letters arrived, Olivia could hardly contain her excitement. She had been accepted to her top choice with a full scholarship. "I did it, Mr. Harrison," she exclaimed, bursting into his classroom. "I got in." Mr. Harrison's face lit up with pride. "I never doubted you for a moment, Olivia." Neither of them noticed Amber lingering in the doorway, her face twisted with jealousy and anger. As the end of the school year approached, excitement built for the senior prom. Olivia, who had never attended a school dance before, decided to go. She saved up money from her library job to buy a simple dress. The night of the prom, Olivia entered the decorated gym, feeling both nervous and excited. For once, she felt like she belonged. Halfway through the evening, the principal took the stage. "And now," he announced, "it's time to crown this year's prom king and queen." Olivia barely paid attention as the king was crowned, but then she heard her name called. "And your prom queen is Olivia Parker." Stunned, Olivia made her way to the stage. As the crown was placed on her head, she saw Amber push through the crowd, a wicked smile on her face. "Wait," Amber called out. "Before we celebrate our new queen, there's something you all should see." She pulled out her phone and pressed play. A video appeared on the large screen behind the stage. It was security camera footage from the school, showing Olivia and Mr. Harrison in his classroom after hours. But the video had been edited, cutting out context and making innocent interactions seem inappropriate. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. "This is what our queen has been up to," Amber announced triumphantly, "seducing a teacher to get ahead." Olivia stood frozen, the crown suddenly feeling like a weight on her head. She looked out at the sea of faces, some shocked, some disgusted, some pitying. Her eyes landed on Mr. Harrison, who looked as devastated as she felt. In that moment, something inside Olivia broke. Without a word, she ran from the stage, pushing past her classmates and out into the night. As she ran, tears streaming down her face, Olivia made a decision. She was done with Oak Ridge, done with the cruelty and the lies. She would leave tonight and never look back. Little did she know, this moment of humiliation would be the catalyst for a journey that would change her life forever. Olivia stood in front of her dorm room, her hand shaking as she reached for the doorknob. It had been 3 months since she fled Oak Ridge, leaving behind everything she knew. Now here she was at her dream university, about to start her first day of classes. As she entered the bustling lecture hall, Olivia felt a familiar tightness in her chest. The room seemed to shrink, voices blending into a deafening roar. She stumbled to an empty seat, her breathing rapid and shallow. "Are you okay?" the girl next to her asked, concern in her voice. Olivia nodded, unable to speak. She closed her eyes, trying to calm herself. But instead of relief, she saw flashes of that night. The cruel laughter, the doctored video, the looks of disgust on her classmates' faces. The panic attack passed, but it left Olivia drained. As the professor began the lecture, she struggled to focus, the words washing over her in a meaningless stream. This pattern continued for weeks. Olivia excelled in her assignments, but every class, every social interaction was a battle against her anxiety. She avoided the cafeteria, eating alone in her room. Group projects filled her with dread. One night, unable to sleep, Olivia found herself in the computer lab. The quiet hum of the machines calmed her. On a whim, she opened a programming tutorial. As she worked through the exercises, hours slipped by unnoticed. For the first time since arriving at university, Olivia felt at peace. She began spending more time in the lab, diving deeper into the world of coding. It was logical, predictable, everything her life hadn't been. In lines of code, Olivia found a sense of control she'd been missing. But despite this newfound passion, Olivia's struggles persisted. The smallest things could trigger her anxiety. A slammed door would send her back to that locker. A laugh that sounded too much like Amber's would make her freeze in fear. Her grades began to slip. The workload, combined with her constant state of anxiety, became overwhelming. Olivia started missing classes, too exhausted to leave her bed. One afternoon, as Olivia sat in her dorm room, staring blankly at her textbook, her phone rang. The screen displayed a number she didn't recognize. Hesitantly, she answered. "Hello? Olivia? It's Mr. Harrison." Olivia nearly dropped the phone. "Mr. Harrison? How did you get my number?" "That's not important right now," he replied. "What's important is you. How are you doing, Olivia?" The concern in his voice broke something in Olivia. Before she knew it, she was sobbing, pouring out everything. Her panic attacks, her struggles with classes, her feelings of isolation. Mr. Harrison listened patiently. When Olivia finally fell silent, he spoke. "Olivia, do you remember what I told you about my daughter?" "That she died of cancer," Olivia replied, wiping her eyes. "Yes, but there's more to the story," Mr. Harrison said. "Before she got sick, she struggled with anxiety, just like you're experiencing now." Olivia's breath caught. "She did?" "Yes. And do you know what helped her? Finding something she was passionate about. For her, it was art. For you, maybe it's this programming you mentioned." As Mr. Harrison spoke, Olivia felt a glimmer of hope. "But what if I'm not good enough?" she asked, voicing her deepest fear. "Olivia, you are more than good enough," Mr. Harrison said firmly. "You've overcome so much already. Don't let your past define your future." After hanging up, Olivia sat in silence, processing the conversation. For the first time, she allowed herself to think about her future beyond just surviving day to day. The next morning, Olivia forced herself to attend class. As she listened to the lecture, an idea began to form. What if she could create a program to help students like her, students struggling with anxiety and trauma? Excitement bubbled up inside her. She opened her laptop and began typing furiously, outlining her idea. A platform that could provide resources, connect students with counselors, and offer coping strategies. As she worked, Olivia felt a sense of purpose she hadn't experienced since leaving Oak Ridge. She knew it wouldn't be easy. Her anxiety wouldn't disappear overnight, and there would be challenges ahead. But for the first time in months, Olivia felt hopeful. That night, as she lay in bed, Olivia made a decision. She would no longer let her past dictate her future. She would use her experiences, painful as they were, to help others. And in doing so, maybe she could finally start to heal herself. With this resolve, Olivia drifted off to sleep, dreaming of lines of code and a future bright with possibility. 4 years had passed since that pivotal night in Olivia's dorm room. Now, freshly graduated with honors in computer science, she stood before the imposing glass building of TechCore, one of the leading software companies in the country. Taking a deep breath, Olivia stepped inside. The lobby bustled with activity, people in suits rushing about with purpose. She approached the reception desk, her heart racing. "Olivia Parker, here for my first day," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. The receptionist smiled. "Welcome to TechCore, Miss Parker. Please take the elevator to the 15th floor. Mr. Johnson will meet you there." As the elevator climbed, Olivia's mind raced. This was her chance to prove herself, to show the world what she was capable of. Mr. Johnson, a balding man with a friendly smile, greeted her warmly. "Ah, Miss Parker, we've been looking forward to having you join our team. Your coding skills are impressive." Olivia felt a surge of pride. All those late nights in the computer lab had paid off. Her first weeks at TechCore flew by in a whirlwind of new faces, complex projects, and long hours. Olivia threw herself into her work, determined to succeed. Her innovative solutions and tireless work ethic quickly caught the attention of her superiors. 3 months into her job, Olivia was assigned to lead a small team on a high-priority project. As she presented her ideas in a meeting, she noticed her colleagues exchanging impressed glances. But not everyone was thrilled with Olivia's rapid rise. Mark, a senior developer who had been with the company for years, watched her progress with growing resentment. One afternoon, as Olivia was coding at her desk, she overheard Mark talking to another colleague. Can you believe they put her in charge? She's been here, what, 5 minutes? It's not right. Olivia's cheeks burned, but she kept her eyes on her screen, determined not to let their words affect her. As the weeks passed, Olivia faced more obstacles. Her ideas were questioned in meetings, her codes scrutinized more closely than others. She began to notice small acts of sabotage, important emails accidentally deleted, her name left off key communications. Despite these challenges, Olivia persevered. Her project was a success, earning her a promotion to project manager. But with this new position came new pressures. One day, Olivia was called into the office of James Thompson, the head of their division. As she entered, she was struck by a sense of familiarity. Something about his features reminded her of someone from her past, but she couldn't place it. "Olivia, great work on the Nexus project," James said, gesturing for her to sit. "I've got a new assignment for you. It's high profile, could really boost your career." As James outlined the project, Olivia felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. This was a huge opportunity, but also a huge responsibility. "There's just one more thing," James said, his tone shifting. He moved closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I'd like us to discuss this further over dinner. What do you say?" Olivia froze, her mind racing. The implication in his touch, his tone, was clear. Memories of the false accusations from high school flooded back. I don't think that would be appropriate, sir," Olivia managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. James's friendly demeanor vanished. "Come now, Olivia. You're a smart girl. You know how things work in this business. Sometimes you need to play the game to get ahead." Olivia stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I'm sorry, Mr. Thompson, but I'm not interested in playing any games. I'd like to be judged solely on my work." As she turned to leave, James called out, "You're making a mistake, Parker. You'll regret this." Back at her desk, Olivia's hands shook as she tried to focus on her work. She knew she had just made a powerful enemy, but she refused to compromise her integrity. The next few weeks were tense. Olivia found herself excluded from important meetings, her ideas dismissed or credited to others. The project she had been promised was given to Mark, who shot her a smug look across the office. As the situation worsened, Olivia wrestled with what to do. Should she report James? But it was her word against his, and he had years of influence in the company. One morning, Olivia arrived at work to find her access card denied. Confused, she made her way to HR, where she was met with cold stares. "Miss Parker, we're terminating your employment, effective immediately," the HR manager said. "We've received reports of unprofessional behavior and poor performance." Olivia stood in shock, unable to process what was happening. As security escorted her out, she caught sight of James watching from his office, a satisfied smile on his face. Outside, clutching a box with her personal items, Olivia felt a mix of anger and despair. Everything she had worked for, gone in an instant. As she hailed a cab, a realization hit her. James Thompson, now she knew why he looked familiar. He was Amber's father. In that moment, standing on the sidewalk, Olivia made a decision. She wouldn't let this defeat her. She had overcome worse before. With a deep breath, she pulled out her phone and opened her coding project, the educational platform she had dreamed up in college. "If they won't let me make a difference from the inside," she muttered to herself, "then I'll do it on my own." Little did Olivia know, this setback would be the catalyst for her greatest triumph yet. Olivia sat at her small kitchen table, surrounded by papers and her laptop. It had been 3 months since her abrupt dismissal from TechCore, and she was pouring every ounce of energy into her startup idea. Her savings were dwindling rapidly. Rent was due next week, and she wasn't sure how she'd make it. But Olivia refused to give up. She had come too far to turn back now. Today was a big day. She had finally secured a meeting with a potential investor. As she rehearsed her pitch one last time, her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Good luck today, sweetie. I'm proud of you, no matter what happens." Olivia smiled, drawing strength from her mother's words. She grabbed her laptop and headed out. The investor's office was intimidating, all glass and steel. Olivia took a deep breath and walked in, her head held high. Mr. Dawson, the investor, listened politely as Olivia outlined her vision for an educational platform that would make quality learning accessible to underprivileged students. "It's an interesting concept," Mr. Dawson said when she finished. but I'm not sure there's a viable market for it. Most of these kids can't afford fancy tech. Olivia felt her heart sink, but she pressed on. That's exactly the point, sir. By partnering with schools and nonprofits, we can provide the technology to those who need it most. Mr. Dawson shook his head. I'm sorry, Miss Parker. It's just not a good fit for us right now. Olivia left the office, fighting back tears. This was her third rejection this week. As she walked home, doubt began to creep in. Was she fooling herself? Maybe she should just give up and find another corporate job. But as she passed a rundown school, she saw a group of kids huddled around a single outdated computer. The sight reignited her determination. These were the kids she wanted to help. She couldn't give up on them. Back at home, Olivia dove back into work. She refined her business plan, tweaked her prototype, and researched more potential investors. Days turned into weeks. Olivia's routine became a blur of coding, pitching, and countless cups of coffee. She moved to a cheaper apartment, took on freelance work to make ends meet, and poured every spare minute into her startup. Finally, after what felt like 100 rejections, Olivia got her break. A small angel investor group expressed interest in her idea. They didn't have much capital to offer, but it was enough to get started. With funding secured, Olivia threw herself into building her company. She hired a small team of developers, rented a tiny office space, and launched a beta version of her platform. The first few months were grueling. Olivia worked around the clock, fixing bugs, adding features, and reaching out to schools. There were nights she slept at her desk, too exhausted to go home. But slowly, things began to improve. Word spread about the platform. Schools in underprivileged areas started signing up. Olivia began receiving emails from teachers and students, thanking her for the difference the program was making. 1 year after starting her company, Olivia stood in front of her small team, celebrating their first major milestone. They had just signed a contract with a large school district, which would bring their platform to thousands of students. As Olivia raised a toast to her team, her phone rang. It was her mother. "Olivia, honey," her mother's voice was weak. "I'm not feeling well. The doctor wants me to come in for some tests." Olivia felt her world tilt. In her driven focus on her company, she had been neglecting her visits home. Guilt washed over her. "I'll be there first thing tomorrow, Mom," she promised. The next day, Olivia sat in a sterile hospital room, holding her mother's hand as the doctor delivered the news. The chronic illness that had plagued her mother for years had taken a turn for the worse. She needed round-the-clock care. Olivia's mind raced. How could she manage her fledgling company and take care of her mother? The stress of the past year, combined with this new worry, felt overwhelming. As she helped her mother into the car, Olivia's phone buzzed incessantly. Her team was calling, probably with questions about the new contract. For the first time since starting her company, Olivia ignored the calls. That night, as her mother slept in the next room, Olivia sat at her childhood desk, her head in her hands. She was at a crossroads. Her company was finally gaining traction, but her mother needed her. How could she choose? Suddenly, she remembered Mr. Harrison's words from years ago. "Sometimes, Olivia, the biggest challenges lead to the most innovative solutions." An idea began to form in Olivia's mind. What if she could adapt her platform to help people like her mother? A system that could connect patients with caregivers, provide remote health monitoring, and offer support for families. With renewed energy, Olivia opened her laptop and began to code. She didn't know how, but she was determined to find a way to balance her company and her mother's care. This new challenge, as daunting as it seemed, might just be the key to taking her platform to the next level. As the sun began to rise, Olivia looked up from her screen, a mix of exhaustion and excitement on her face. She had a long road ahead, but for the first time in days, she felt hope. Whatever came next, she would face it head-on, just as she always had. Olivia stood in front of a packed auditorium, her heart racing. 3 years had passed since that night at her mother's bedside, and her life had transformed in ways she never imagined. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice steady despite her nerves. "Welcome to the launch of Educare Plus." The crowd listened intently as Olivia explained how her educational platform had evolved to include healthcare support features. She shared stories of students whose lives were changed by access to quality education. and of families who found relief through the new caregiving tools. As she concluded her presentation, the room erupted in applause. Investors rushed to speak with her. Reporters clamored for interviews. Olivia felt a mix of pride and disbelief. Her little startup had become a nationwide phenomenon. Back at the office, Olivia's team greeted her with cheers and congratulations. The atmosphere was electric. As she looked around at the faces of the people who had believed in her vision, Olivia felt a surge of gratitude. But amidst the celebration, a familiar pang of loneliness hit her. Success had come at a price. Long hours and constant travel had left little time for a personal life. Olivia pushed the feeling aside, focusing on the work ahead. Weeks flew by in a blur of meetings, product updates, and press appearances. Educare Plus was growing faster than anyone had anticipated. Schools across the country were adopting the platform, and healthcare providers were partnering to expand the caregiving features. One morning, as Olivia was preparing for another day of meetings, her assistant burst into her office. "Olivia, you need to see this," she exclaimed, thrusting a tablet into Olivia's hands. On the screen was a financial news website. The headline made Olivia's jaw drop. Educare Plus valuation hits $1 billion. Founder Olivia Parker named one of the most influential women in tech. Olivia sank into her chair, overwhelmed. She had been so focused on the day-to-day operations that she hadn't fully grasped the scale of what she'd built. As the news spread, Olivia's phone rang nonstop. Old colleagues reached out to congratulate her, investors wanted to discuss expansion plans, and media outlets requested interviews. In the midst of the chaos, Olivia received a call from an unknown number. "Hello," she answered hesitantly. "Olivia, it's Mr. Harrison." Olivia's breath caught. She hadn't spoken to her old teacher in years. "Mr. Harrison, it's great to hear from you. How are you?" "I'm doing well, Olivia. But more importantly, how are you? I've been following your success in the news. I always knew you were destined for great things." As they talked, Olivia felt a wave of emotion wash over her. Mr. Harrison had believed in her when no one else did. His support had been the catalyst for everything she'd achieved. "I couldn't have done it without you, Mr. Harrison," Olivia said, her voice thick with gratitude. "You did this, Olivia," he replied. "You took every hardship and turned it into strength. I'm proud of you." After hanging up, Olivia sat in silence, reflecting on her journey. From the scared girl in the school locker to the CEO of a billion-dollar company, she had come so far. But her moment of reflection was short-lived. Her assistant knocked on the door, reminding her of her next meeting. As Olivia gathered her things, she glanced at a photo on her desk. It was of her mother, smiling from her hospital bed, surrounded by the high-tech monitoring equipment provided by Educare Plus. A mix of emotions washed over Olivia. Pride in what she'd accomplished, gratitude for the people who had supported her, and a renewed determination to keep pushing forward. The next few months were a whirlwind. Olivia testified before Congress about the importance of equal access to education and healthcare. She gave keynote speeches at tech conferences and universities. Her face appeared on the covers of business magazines. But with increased visibility came increased scrutiny. Competitors began to emerge, trying to replicate Educare Plus's success. Critics questioned the platform's data privacy policies. The pressure to maintain the company's growth was immense. Olivia threw herself into addressing these challenges. She hired top security experts to strengthen the platform's privacy measures. She initiated partnerships with other tech companies to stay ahead of the competition. Late one night, as Olivia was working in her office, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from her old high school in Oak Ridge. They were organizing a 15-year reunion and wanted her to be the guest of honor. Olivia stared at the screen, a flood of memories washing over her. Oak Ridge felt like a lifetime ago. The thought of going back, of facing the people who had once tormented her, made her stomach churn. Her finger hovered over the delete button. It would be so easy to ignore the invitation, to leave the past in the past. But then she thought of the students using her platform, of the families benefiting from the caregiving tools. She thought of Mr. Harrison and how he had encouraged her to face her fears. With a deep breath, Olivia began to type her response. She would go to the reunion. She would face her past, not as the scared girl she once was, but as the strong, successful woman she had become. As she hit send, Olivia felt a mix of anxiety and determination. She didn't know what awaited her in Oak Ridge, but she was ready to face it head-on. After all, every challenge she'd faced had only made her stronger. This would be no different. Little did Olivia know, the reunion would bring unexpected confrontations and revelations that would shake the very foundation of her hard-earned success. Olivia's sleek car pulled into the parking lot of Oak Ridge High School. She sat there for a moment, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. The building looked smaller than she remembered, yet it still loomed large in her mind. Taking a deep breath, Olivia stepped out of the car. She smoothed down her designer dress, a stark contrast to the second-hand clothes she once wore in these halls. As she walked towards the entrance, she could feel curious eyes on her. "Oh my God, is that Olivia Parker?" she heard someone whisper. Inside, the gym was decorated with balloons and a banner that read, "Welcome, Class of 2008. Olivia scanned the room, recognizing faces that had once been so familiar. "Olivia, you made it!" She turned to see Mr. Harrison approaching, his hair now completely gray, but his eyes as kind as ever. Olivia felt a wave of emotion as she hugged her old mentor. "Mr. Harrison, it's so good to see you," she said, fighting back tears. As they caught up, more of Olivia's former classmates approached. Some were genuinely warm, others clearly trying to ingratiate themselves with the now famous Olivia Parker. "Olivia, wow, I always knew you'd do great things," said a man Olivia vaguely remembered as one of Amber's friends. She nodded politely, knowing full well he had never given her a second glance in high school. As the night progressed, Olivia found herself relaxing slightly. She shared stories of her company's success, listened to updates about marriages and careers, and even laughed at some old-school memories. But there was one face she hadn't seen yet, one confrontation she both dreaded and anticipated. Well, if it isn't the great Olivia Parker. Olivia turned to see Amber Thompson standing behind her. The years hadn't been as kind to Amber as they had to Olivia. Her once perfect hair was dull, and worry lines creased her forehead. "Hello, Amber," Olivia said calmly. "How are you?" Amber's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, just great. Not all of us can be billionaire CEOs, but I get by." The bitterness in Amber's voice was palpable. Olivia felt a mix of emotions, pity, anger, and a strange sense of triumph. "I heard you're a pharmaceutical sales rep now," Olivia said, trying to keep the conversation civil. Amber's face tightened. "Yeah, well, we can't all have daddy's connections to get ahead, can we?" Olivia's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" "Oh, come on," Amber sneered. "Everyone knows your success is because of your family's influence. How else could someone like you make it so big?" Before Olivia could respond, another voice cut in. "Actually, Amber, you couldn't be more wrong." Mr. Harrison stepped up beside Olivia, his voice firm. "Olivia built her company from nothing, with no help from anyone. I've watched her struggle and persevere for years." Amber looked taken aback, but quickly recovered. "Whatever. Enjoy your fame while it lasts, Olivia. People like you always fall eventually." As Amber stormed off, Olivia felt a mix of anger and hurt. Despite all her success, part of her was still that insecure girl from high school. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Olivia mingled and chatted, but her mind was elsewhere. She couldn't shake Amber's words, or the realization that her past still had such power over her. As the reunion wound down, Olivia found herself standing alone by the punch bowl. She watched her former classmates laughing and reminiscing, feeling oddly detached from it all. "Quite a night, huh?" Olivia turned to see David Chen, her old lab partner, standing beside her. Unlike the others, David's smile seemed genuine. "Yeah, it's been interesting," Olivia replied. "Listen," David said, lowering his voice. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry for how things were back then. I should have stood up for you more." Olivia was surprised by his sincerity. "Thank you, David. That means a lot." As they talked, Olivia felt some of the tension from the evening's start to dissipate. David asked thoughtful questions about her company, showing real interest beyond just her celebrity status. Suddenly, a commotion near the stage caught everyone's attention. Amber, clearly drunk, had grabbed the microphone. "Hey everyone, let's hear it for Olivia Parker, our own little Cinderella story." Amber's words were slurred but filled with venom. "But don't worry, I've got a great video to show you all. Let's see how our princess got her crown." Olivia's heart stopped. She knew exactly what video Amber was talking about, the edited footage from prom night that had ruined her life all those years ago. As Amber fumbled with her phone, trying to connect it to the projector, the room fell into an uncomfortable silence. All eyes turned to Olivia, waiting to see how she would react. In that moment, Olivia had a choice. She could run, like she did all those years ago. She could let Amber humiliate her again, or she could stand her ground and face her past once and for all. Taking a deep breath, Olivia stepped forward. "Actually, Amber," she said, her voice strong and clear, "I think I have something to say first." The room fell silent as Olivia made her way to the stage. As she took the microphone from a stunned Amber, Olivia knew that whatever happened next would change everything. The truth about her past, her struggles, and her success was about to come out, for better or worse. Olivia stood on the stage, microphone in hand, facing her former classmates. The room was silent, all eyes fixed on her. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. 15 years ago, I stood on this very stage, humiliated and broken, Olivia began, her voice clear and strong. Many of you were there that night. You saw what happened, or at least you thought you did. She glanced at Amber, who stood to the side, a mix of anger and confusion on her face. The video Amber wants to show you was a lie, a carefully edited piece of footage designed to destroy me, and for a while, it did. Olivia paused, letting her words sink in. She could see the shock on some faces, guilt on others. I left Oak Ridge that night, vowing never to return. I was hurt, angry, and afraid. But looking back, I realized that moment was the beginning of my journey, not the end. She went on to share her story, the struggles in college, the betrayals in her first job, the challenges of starting her company. With each word, Olivia felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. Every obstacle, every setback, every moment of doubt, they all led me to where I am today. My success wasn't handed to me. It wasn't because of family connections or unfair advantages. It was built on hard work, determination, and the belief that education and technology could change lives. Olivia looked directly at Amber. "I'm not here to seek revenge or to make anyone feel guilty. I'm here because I finally realized that to truly move forward, I needed to face my past." The room was completely silent. Olivia could see tears in some eyes, looks of admiration in others. My company, Educare Plus, was born from the pain I experienced here. It's designed to help students who feel lost, overlooked, or bullied, to give them the tools and support they need to succeed, no matter their background. She paused, her voice softening. And recently we've expanded to include healthcare support features. Because I learned that sometimes, the people who need help the most are the ones least able to ask for it. Olivia's thoughts turned to her mother, to the countless families benefiting from her platform. Every life changed. Every student who finds hope, every family that gets the support they need, that's my revenge. That's my victory. She looked out at her classmates, seeing them not as the teenagers who had tormented her, but as adults with their own struggles and regrets. We all have pain in our past. We've all made mistakes, but it's what we do with that pain, how we learn from those mistakes, that defines us. Olivia turned to Amber, who now looked small and defeated. "Amber, I forgive you. Not for you, but for me, because holding on to that anger and hurt was only holding me back." Amber's eyes widened in surprise. Olivia continued, addressing the whole room. "And to all of you who stood by and watched, who maybe wanted to help but were too afraid, I forgive you too. We were all just kids, trying to figure out our place in the world." She took a deep breath, feeling lighter than she had in years. "So go ahead, Amber, show your video if you want, but know that it doesn't have the power to hurt me anymore. I'm not that scared girl anymore. I'm stronger because of what I've been through, not in spite of it." The room erupted in applause. People stood, cheering and wiping away tears. Amber, looking shocked and somewhat ashamed, quietly unplugged her phone from the projector. As Olivia stepped down from the stage, she was surrounded by her former classmates. This time, their words of praise and admiration felt genuine. Mr. Harrison made his way through the crowd, enveloping Olivia in a hug. "I've never been more proud of you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Just then, Olivia's phone buzzed in her purse. She pulled it out, seeing a message from her assistant. Her heart dropped as she read the words on the screen. "Urgent. Major news outlet reporting on alleged financial irregularities at Educare Plus, stock price plummeting, board requesting emergency meeting. Olivia felt the room spin. Everything she had built, everything she had just declared to her old classmates, was suddenly at risk. Mr. Harrison noticed her distress. "Olivia, what's wrong?" She looked up at him, her mind racing. I have to go. There's an emergency at the company." As Olivia rushed out of the gym, her phone buzzing constantly with incoming messages and calls, she realized that her night of confronting the past was far from over. A new challenge, perhaps the biggest of her career, was just beginning. In the car, as she sped towards the airport, Olivia's mind was a whirlwind of emotions and thoughts. The high of her triumphant speech was quickly being overshadowed by the looming crisis. She didn't know what awaited her back at the company, but she was determined to face it head-on, just as she had faced her past tonight. Little did Olivia know, this new challenge would test not only her business acumen, but also the very principles and integrity she had just so boldly proclaimed. Olivia burst into the emergency board meeting, still wearing her reunion dress. The room was tense, filled with worried faces and frantic whispers. "What's going on?" Olivia demanded, addressing her CFO. "It's bad, Olivia," he replied, handing her a tablet. "A major news outlet is alleging financial irregularities in our last quarter's report. They're claiming we inflated user numbers to boost our valuation." Olivia's mind raced. She knew the numbers were accurate. They had worked tirelessly to grow their user base. "This is ridiculous," she said. "Where are they getting this information?" "We don't know," her head of PR chimed in, "but it's spreading like wildfire. Our stock has dropped 30% in the last hour." Olivia took a deep breath, centering herself. "Okay, here's what we're going to do. First, we need a statement denying these allegations. Then I want a full audit of our financials. We have nothing to hide, so let's prove it." The next 48 hours were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and press conferences. Olivia barely slept, running on coffee and determination. She knew that everything she had built was at stake. As the audit progressed, a disturbing pattern emerged. Someone had indeed been tampering with the numbers, but not to inflate them. Instead, it appeared that someone was trying to make the company look worse than it actually was. "It's sabotage," Olivia realized, a chill running down her spine. Further investigation revealed the culprit, Mark, her former colleague from TechCore, who had joined Educare Plus a year ago. He had been secretly working with a competitor, trying to devalue the company for a hostile takeover. With the truth uncovered, Olivia held a press conference, presenting the evidence of the sabotage and the real numbers, which were even better than originally reported. The stock began to recover, and the crisis started to abate. Exhausted but relieved, Olivia finally had a moment to breathe. That's when she remembered Mr. Harrison. In the chaos of the past few days, she had forgotten to check in on him after leaving the reunion so abruptly. She dialed his number, but there was no answer. Worried, she called the school, only to receive devastating news. Mr. Harrison had been admitted to the hospital the night of the reunion. His cancer, which had been in remission, had returned aggressively. Olivia rushed to the hospital, her heart pounding. She found Mr. Harrison in the ICU, looking frail and tired, but his eyes lit up when he saw her. "Olivia," he said weakly, "I'm so glad you're here." She took his hand, fighting back tears. "Mr. Harrison, I'm so sorry. I should have been here sooner." He shook his head. "No apologies necessary. I saw the news. You had your own battles to fight." They talked for hours. Mr. Harrison told her how proud he was of her speech at the reunion, how he had always known she was destined for greatness. Olivia shared stories of her company, her successes and struggles. As the evening wore on, Mr. Harrison's breathing became labored. He squeezed Olivia's hand, his eyes serious. "Olivia, there's something I need to tell you," he said. "Something I should have told you years ago." Olivia leaned in, her heart racing. "I knew your father," Mr. Harrison confessed. "He was my best friend in college." Olivia's world tilted. "What? But how?" Mr. Harrison explained that he and Olivia's father had been inseparable in their youth, but a falling out over a woman, Olivia's mother, had ended their friendship. "When I realized who you were, I was too ashamed to say anything," he continued. "I could have helped your family, could have prevented so much pain, but my pride got in the way." Olivia sat in stunned silence, trying to process this revelation. "Your father was a good man, Olivia," Mr. Harrison said. "He would be so proud of the woman you've become." Before Olivia could respond, alarms started blaring. Mr. Harrison's vitals were dropping rapidly. Nurses rushed in, pushing Olivia aside as they worked to stabilize him. In the chaos, Olivia was ushered out of the room. She stood in the hallway, her mind reeling from the events of the past few days and the bombshell Mr. Harrison had just dropped. Hours passed. Finally, a doctor emerged from the room, his face grim. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "We did everything we could." Olivia felt her knees buckle. Mr. Harrison was gone. The man who had believed in her, who had set her on the path to success, who apparently held the key to her past, was gone. As she left the hospital in a daze, Olivia's phone buzzed. It was a message from her assistant. "Urgent news about Amber Thompson's daughter. She's being severely bullied at school. Considering the circumstances, thought you should know." Olivia stared at the message, a mix of emotions washing over her. Despite everything that had happened with Amber, the thought of her daughter suffering the same pain Olivia had endured was unbearable. In that moment, standing in the hospital parking lot, Olivia made a decision. She would honor Mr. Harrison's memory by breaking the cycle of pain and resentment. She would use her platform, her success, to make a real difference, starting with Amber's daughter. As she drove home, Olivia's mind was already formulating a plan. The reunion, the company crisis, Mr. Harrison's revelation, and now this news about Amber's daughter, it all seemed to be leading her towards a new purpose. Little did Olivia know, this decision would set in motion a series of events that would not only change her life once again, but also bring her journey full circle in ways she could never have imagined. 3 months after Mr. Harrison's funeral, Olivia stood in front of Oak Ridge High School once again. This time, she wasn't here for a reunion, but to launch a pilot program that could change the lives of students like her. As she walked through the familiar hallways, now plastered with posters announcing the Educare Plus anti-bullying initiative, Olivia felt a mix of emotions. This was where her journey had begun, and in a way, where it had led her back. The school auditorium was packed with students, teachers, and parents. Olivia took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage. "Good morning, everyone," she began. "I'm here today not as a successful CEO, but as someone who once walked these halls feeling alone, afraid, and hopeless." She shared her story, not sparing any details about the bullying she had endured. The room was silent, every eye fixed on her. "But my story isn't unique," Olivia continued. "Even today, students are facing the same challenges I did. That's why we're here, to break this cycle of pain and create a safe, supportive environment for every student." She outlined the program, a combination of peer support groups, anonymous reporting systems, and integration with the Educare Plus platform to provide resources and counseling. As Olivia spoke, she noticed a familiar face in the crowd. Amber Thompson sat in the back row, her daughter beside her. The girl looked withdrawn, her eyes downcast, a painfully familiar sight to Olivia. After the presentation, as students and teachers crowded around to ask questions, Olivia made her way to Amber. "Thank you for coming," Olivia said softly. Amber nodded, her usual bravado gone. I didn't think you'd want me here after everything." "This isn't about us, Amber," Olivia replied, glancing at Amber's daughter. "It's about making sure no other child goes through what we did." Amber's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how to help her," she whispered, nodding towards her daughter. "I don't know how to fix this." Olivia felt a surge of empathy. "You can't fix it alone," she said, "but we can work together to make things better." Over the next few weeks, Olivia threw herself into implementing the program. She conducted workshops with students, trained teachers, and worked closely with the school administration to address systemic issues. One afternoon, as Olivia was leaving a particularly intense session with a group of bullied students, she ran into Amber's daughter, Lisa. "Miss Parker?" Lisa said hesitantly. "Can I talk to you?" Olivia nodded, leading her to a quiet corner. Lisa opened up about her experiences, her voice shaking as she described the constant taunts and exclusion she faced. "I just want it to stop," Lisa finished, tears streaming down her face. Olivia's heart ached, remembering her own pain. "It will," she promised. "We're going to make sure of it." That evening, Olivia sat in her hotel room, mulling over the day's events. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from her assistant. Major Tech magazine wants to do a cover story on you. They're calling you the education revolution's new face. Should I schedule the interview? Olivia smiled but didn't reply immediately. Instead, she opened her laptop and began typing. An idea had been forming in her mind, and now was the time to act on it. Hours later, as dawn broke, Olivia finally sat back, exhausted but satisfied. On her screen was a detailed plan for a nationwide rollout of the anti-bullying program, integrated fully with Educare Plus. As she got ready to head back to the school, Olivia's phone rang. It was Amber. "Olivia," Amber said, her voice thick with emotion. "Lisa told me about your talk yesterday. I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to thank me, Amber," Olivia replied, "but there is something you can do. We need parent volunteers for the program. Would you be interested?" There was a pause, then, yes, I would." As Olivia hung up, she felt a sense of closure. The cycle of pain that had begun in these halls years ago was finally breaking. Later that day, as Olivia watched a group of students, including Lisa, laughing together during a team-building exercise, she felt a presence beside her. She turned to see the school principal. "Miss Parker," he said, "what you're doing here, it's extraordinary. But I have to ask, why? Why come back to the place that caused you so much pain?" Olivia smiled, her eyes on the students. "Because sometimes the only way to heal old wounds is to help others avoid getting them in the first place." The principal nodded thoughtfully. "Well, whatever your reasons, we're grateful. You're changing lives here, Miss Parker." As the principal walked away, Olivia's gaze fell on a photo of Mr. Harrison hanging in the hallway. She remembered his words from years ago. "Sometimes, Olivia, the biggest challenges lead to the most innovative solutions." She had faced her past, confronted her bullies, built a successful company, and now she was back where it all began, turning her pain into purpose. Olivia's journey had come full circle. The scared girl who once hid in library corners was now standing tall, using her experiences to light the way for others. As she watched the students, the future leaders, innovators, and changemakers, Olivia knew that this was just the beginning. The bell rang, signaling the end of the day. As students filed out, many stopped to thank Olivia or share a quick story. She listened to each one, her heart full. This, Olivia realized, was her true success. Not the money or the fame, but the lives she was touching, the change she was creating. And as she walked out of Oak Ridge High that day, Olivia Parker knew that her greatest achievements were still to come. As we close this chapter of Olivia's inspiring journey, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Did her story resonate with you? Have you faced similar challenges in your life? Share your experiences in the comments below. If you enjoyed this tale of resilience and redemption, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories that remind us of the power of the human spirit. Remember, like Olivia, your past doesn't define you. It's the strength you find in overcoming it that shapes your future.